Now, this is the story that ultimately inspired 1408 to be written by Stephen King, as well as the movie that was made many years later. Make sure you stick around because the story starts out a little bit dramatic, but it derails really quick and becomes something creepy, weird, and out of this world. Kate Farmer was born in 1864 in Iowa, and her mother, June, would have to raise her child alone because the father, George Washington Farmer, at the time, did not really want to have a baby. They were always careful and protective, but something had happened, and now she was pregnant, which meant that George had to marry her, and he did not like it at all. He was a very ambitious and keen person. He wanted to become better and become a manager, basically make a career for himself, but now he had to also marry someone and even take care of a child, which wasn't favorable for him. Now, sadly, June's father, Joe, was a conservative Christian. He too did not enjoy that his daughter was pregnant even before marriage. He despised the situation, and even though he attended the wedding, he never spoke to his daughter again. The last time June met with her father, just one-to-one, was at this diner that was smelling with burnt bacon, and it was old and rusty, and she remembers clearly her father saying the words, "I'm disappointed." And after the wedding, they never really saw each other again. So she was alone. A husband that did not want to have a baby nor wanted marriage at this early age, and the father that would not talk to her anymore because of his religious beliefs and ideologies and morale. She was alone. She had to take care of the baby on her own. Her husband, George Washington Farmer, would come home late and sometimes even drunk, never really helping with the baby, let alone with his wife. June got sick very soon. Anxiety and pain, she just could not bear it. And within 2 years of Kate's birth, she passed away. George Washington Farmer did not want to take care of her and did not care for her. Kate, the 2-year-old baby, who nobody really wanted, was shipped to her grandfather as though she was some parcel. Kate's father later became the postmaster in Iowa and remarried, even had 2 children, 2 other girls, which he loved. But unfortunately, Kate never got any of that love. Kate's grandparents are cold towards her. Knowing full well where she came from and how she came to existence, they don't really show any love towards her. Even the community around them does not know that they're taking care of their grandchild now. Until many years later, they don't tell anybody. And when people ask, they just say, "She's here to visit." No doubt, Kate lives this dull and very sad childhood. Kate was put in this dark room in the attic by her grandparents. This old bed that was squeaking, very uncomfortable, a very small window that shines the light through, but very little. It's almost like a prison cell, really, where she's living. It does not smell good, and when people would come to visit her grandparents, they would just send Kate up to her room and tell her not to make any noise at all. She would be in complete isolation of even the neighbors. When she was ready to go to school, they send her to school, but they don't really care about her grades or what she's learning or whether she's learning nothing at all. Kate, though, learns how to read and how to write, and she loves it because now in that small room in the attic, all she's got are books and paper for her to write on. She starts by writing a daily journal, basically her feelings, what she's gone through that day, how she feels about her past, how much she misses her mother, and things like this. But soon enough, this isolation and the fear and the loneliness, because even at school, she has not many friends, she feels isolated. Not just in terms of family, but also in school, not a very social person. So she starts writing fiction. She starts writing of her intrusive thoughts first, just these dark thoughts that she gets in her mind. It starts with simple things like her grandfather suddenly dropping dead in her writings. And then she goes into ghost stories, back to murder stories, and back to just killing everyone around her. She would write these really dark and horrifying stories, just gore things, and it would make her feel somewhat better. And she would keep these writings from everyone and would not show it to anyone at all. Her life at that point is just so dark that these are the only stories that come to her mind. There isn't anything sunny or anything happy for her that she can just scribble down. She can't say the sun was shining today. Yay. That's why she chooses these dark stories, and these dark stories soon become so intrusive in her mind that it almost feels real. One day, when she goes to the kitchen and sees her grandfather just sitting at the kitchen table, drinking his cup of coffee, she can't believe it. She takes a gasp and just runs away back to her room, takes a deep breath, and she thinks to herself, I thought my grandfather was murdered. She goes through her notes. She says, I wrote this in my journal. I remember clearly that he had died, which is why I have been sad these past few days. And then when she goes through her notes, she does find that chapter where her grandfather dies. But she immediately realizes it was just a story that she'd written down. It was not something that had happened. It was not a daily journal. It was a story. That's the first time she realizes she can't control her thoughts anymore in a way where she thinks healthy. It is becoming very uninhabitable for her to keep writing, as well as not believing in these stories, because when she writes, she starts believing in them as though they've happened. Many years pass by in these dark moments, living with her grandparents in that small attic. And when she turns 18, she decides to go to California, where she hears that she can tell her stories. There, she meets her future husband, Thomas Edwin Morgan, a young, slim, muscular, blonde man. Almost like a person that would come out of a Lana Del Rey musical clip, you could say. She falls in love immediately. They see each other for the next following years and even start living together. And at 21 years of age, Kate marries Thomas Edwin Morgan. Within that same year, she becomes pregnant. And on the 31st of October, Halloween, 1886, she has her first child. Unfortunately though, the child does not survive. He dies within 2 days, and this takes another toll on Kate's soul. Kate, who's learned to cope with her past and pain through writing, decides to write again. She goes to her desk in her own room and starts writing the entire day. The pain she feels of the death of her son is unbearable. For her, the world has come to an end. For her husband, Thomas Edwin Morgan, it's not really the end of the world. He tries to calm her down in the beginning, and he tries to comfort her, telling her that it's okay, that they can always have another child, it's not the end of the world, and he believes they can get over this sad loss. Unfortunately for Kate though, a baby that she's carried for 9 months inside of her, that she's talked to almost every single night, and that she's seen with all that purity, she can't forget about him. All she can think of is writing. Write about anything at all, just to forget the moment, just to forget about that painful event that has happened. And once she starts writing, she gets back into that zone, into that derailing of her mind, where she can't control it. The things she writes immediately in her own mind become real. Soon enough, she convinces herself that the reason for her son's death was her husband. What she writes down is somewhat disturbing, but also very sad to think about, because she writes that her husband had never really enjoyed her company, that he didn't like being with her, that he didn't really ever want a baby. All those times spent together, he had always resented her. And so when he found out that she was pregnant, he decided that he had to do something about it. He tried certain methods, but he failed at all of them. But then, when her son was born, he somehow managed to poison their baby, and thus the baby died in 2 days. That was the only explanation. There couldn't have been anything else. Many people that Kate knew then had their babies and they were all fine. It must have been him, Thomas, her beloved husband, must have committed this crime. She was sure of it. When you think back to Kate's past, it was not a surprise that she would think her husband did not love her, nor the baby. Her own father had abandoned her, had abandoned her mother when she was in her deathbed. It was much easier for Kate to accept the death of her son in this fictitious, made-up story than it was to accept that he just passed away because it was destined to be so. So she continues to write, and in the story, she believes that her husband will be killing her next. Thomas Edwin Morgan, he's saddened. He sees her write all day long, eating nothing, doing nothing else. She's in her room, making these weird noises, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, and just murmuring to herself and believing in the characters that she's writing, talking to these characters in her own story. He gets scared of her. He's afraid to get too close to her. So during one of Kate's episodes where she's writing without really being aware of what she's writing and she's just really into the story, she writes out a letter to Alan stating that she needs to get away from her husband because she's afraid for her life. Albert Allen, the stepbrother of her husband. They had only met once in this family dinner with friends and other people, and it was a really warm night. And there, Kate had seen Albert, her husband had introduced them, and he seemed to be this very kind and gentle person. She remembers him immediately, but she also remembers the way he looked at her. She knows that he was impressed by her. As unnatural as Albert finds this letter to be, he thinks back to that dinner night, and he remembers this ladylike person that was eating with this delicateness, the way she held the fork, the way she smiled. It was bright, almost eye-blinding. And he remembers clearly what he had felt that night, the butterflies in his stomach. Yes, the letter is a bit weird, because there are words scrabbled here and there that don't make sense at all, but he goes to her anyway. He picks her up from her house when her husband is out for work and they leave. When Thomas Edwin came back home later that day, he immediately realizes that his wife is gone. He can sense the air being a little bit brighter. It just feels a little bit lighter inside, and he feels some sort of joy and excitement. He looks in her room, and surely enough, his wife is gone. He feels relaxed. He takes a deep breath. He goes to bed and sleeps the entire night without waking up once to his wife's laughs or cries. Now, Albert and Kate, they enjoy each other's company. They spend time in Europe, walking late night on the streets, enjoy a special dinner night every now and then, and it goes really well for a while. But Kate, even though she had stopped writing during that time, starts to feel the sadness again. She starts to feel the pain. She can't escape this past that's always haunting her. So eventually, one night, she picks up her pen and she starts writing again. And that's when she realizes the past had always been with her. She was just choosing to ignore it. She now needed to write again to escape it again. Albert soon realizes that this kind and delicate lady that he had met at that dinner night and he'd spent the last year with was no longer there. Her wit, her charm, it was all fading away with that darkness and the depression she was feeling. Once she started writing again, she was no longer Kate anymore. He tried to reach Kate, but there was no reaching her. She was back into writing, and she was enjoying the writing that she was doing, and nothing else mattered for her. It was disturbing. Albert could no longer stay in that house. He left quite a bit of money on the table, and then he said he was going out for smokes and never came back. Weeks later, when Kate realized that Albert was gone, she didn't think that he was ever really there. She writes in her notes and even whispers to herself, "He's gone, he's gone." He was never really here, was he? He was never really here, was he? So she thinks to herself that all that escape, all those things that she had done with Albert was just part of her imagination in her mind. That's how intrusive her writing was, and that's how sick she was getting. After her writing episodes and these crazy sessions of constant writing and mentioning of the past, she starts to feel better. Not better in a healthy way, but she believed for herself to be better. She believed she was feeling better. She believed she was feeling content. The past and everything, all of that pain was now written in the stories before her. So she was rid of those things. She feels good again and starts to go out and starts to live her life like a normal lady would. It was almost like a cycle now. She would write when she was feeling bad, and then she would feel better, go outside again, and she would enjoy the daily life. And when she sees or remembers something saddening, she would go back to writing, maybe for days. The cycle continued on. She visited the doctor because she had a stomach ache that would bother her very badly for days and weeks and even months on end. When she finally visits the doctor, she finds out that she's terminally ill. Another reason for her to have a writing episode. But this time, she doesn't want to be alone. On 24th of November, Thanksgiving, 1892, she goes to the Hotel del Coronado in California. She walks towards the reception, a very ladylike woman, and checks under the fake name Mistress Lottie A. Bernard Detroit. They give her the room 3312, which would become the room to haunt her for the rest of her life. She had no baggage except for a small handbag. Inside, a pen, some paper, and the cash that Albert had left on that kitchen table those many years ago. When the staff saw her, they would think that she was a really rich and wealthy woman because of the way she dressed. She was beautiful and radiant, and there seemed nothing to be wrong with her. Maybe there really wasn't, until she entered the room. That is, not an hour passes by, and Kate, Mistress Lottie, calls at reception, asking for room service to immediately come up and clean the room. On the phone, she shares with the reception that the room was insanely dirty, just disgusting. The floors had bloodstains on them. On the wall, there were these handprints. The sheets were all messy. In the toilet, there were like mud stains and even dirt. The staff can't believe this. They think to themselves, there must have been a mistake. Someone forgot to clean the room. There's no way that the room wasn't cleaned, but something or someone must have missed it. The supervisor gets really angry and immediately goes up to the room with his cleaning lady, which would be Francesca. She's in her 40s, a very small, petite lady with short black hair. They go up there, freaking out as to how they could have forgotten or how they could have missed that much dirt and messiness in a room, only to find out that the room is perfectly clean, neat, and tidy. There's nothing wrong with the room. But Kate is standing on the bed and just screaming and just shaking her head in awe and disbelief and saying, please just clean this room. I cannot stand it for another minute. The supervisor and Francesca take a look at each other like this. The supervisor whispers in Francesca's ear to just go along with it, and if things got out of hand, to not risk her life, to just immediately leave the room. They realize that there's something wrong with Kate Morgan. In her mind, she sees things that aren't really there. So Francesca goes inside the room and immediately starts cleaning the room. Or she basically pretends to clean the room. But everything that Kate says, she does so. If she says there's a spot there, she goes down there on her knees and just starts scrubbing it off. When Kate says, all right, do you see that stain on the wall? Please take it off. Then Francesca pretends to clean the stain on the wall. As Francesca is cleaning the room, Kate starts talking to her and telling her stories from her past. Instead of writing in that moment, it feels better to share the story with someone else, with someone other than herself and the paper. She tells her about her child that had died many years ago. The parents she had never really seen or known. Tells her about that small attic in which her grandfather put her in, and she had to live for many, many years. A lot of pain and suffering in these stories that have happened, and some stories that really haven't happened, are being shared with Francesca as she continues on to pretend cleaning the room. She feels sad sometimes, but also uncertain of the truthness of the stories. Francesca starts thinking, if half of these stories have actually happened to this lady, no wonder she's losing her mind. Kate then says something that makes Francesca stop. She says, "I will die here, you know." And Francesca immediately stops cleaning. She turns to Kate, who's sitting now on the bed, and looks at her to see if she means it or if she's just saying it as a joke. Surely enough, Kate looks dead serious. She's not looking at Francesca, she's looking at this empty wall that's in front of her, and she repeats it, "I will die here, you know." Kate continues, she said, "The doctor said it. I have cancer in my stomach, and my heart has weakened. I will die here, my dear Francesca," she says. When Francesca leaves the room, she's exhausted by all the non-real cleaning that she had to do, and of the stories that she's listened to had just worn her down. She goes back to her room, which is 3302. It's in a different floor than all the guests, and there the housekeepers and the people that work at the hotel would stay. It's hard for her to sleep that night because of all the stories that Kate had told her. So the next day she wakes up, she still feels very exhausted and starts going back to cleaning her rooms and doing her job, when one of the staff members comes to her and says that she's wanted from room 3312. Francesca immediately knows who it is. She feels disturbed. Her stomach kind of cramps. She doesn't want to go there, but a guest is always right at that hotel, so she goes to the room. Now, Kate once again had one of her sessions last night as she was sitting on the desk in this hotel room, 3312. And writing a story that she just made up. It became too real for her. The story she wrote was basically what had happened in that hotel room, the murders that took place in that room. She wrote about all of it. This was the only explanation for the bloodstains on the floor and the dirt in the bathroom. Soon enough, in this writing session with this murder and this pain inside of her own room, she had fallen asleep on the desk. And when she woke up, she was so immersed in that story and the idea what had happened in that room, all of that pain. When she looked around, she immediately saw the bloodstains again and just the dirt in the bathroom. She even, with the corner of her eye, thought she saw a dead body on the ground, and she screamed her heart out, immediately calling reception and asking for Francesca to rush to the room to clean it all up. So when the supervisor came to Francesca to tell her that the guest has asked for her again, Francesca is of course hesitant. She doesn't want to go back up there. But her supervisor told her, if she asks for you specifically, it means she trusts you and she wants you. We can't send anyone else. So Francesca goes back up there. She goes inside the room, and surely enough, none of what was said on the phone is in the room. Everything is clean, everything is still in place. Some things were pushed over, like that small chair, and the bed sheets, yes, were on the ground along with the pillows, but it must have been the doing of Mistress Lottie. No one else came in or out of the hotel room. It doesn't matter, Francesca has to do her job. So she starts cleaning the room, and once again, Kate starts talking to her. But this time, she asks Francesca of something. Kate suggests that Francesca stay with her and help her bath. Francesca finds this very odd. She never helped any of the hotel guests with a bath. And since Kate wasn't really an elderly person, it didn't quite make sense to her. But Kate insists on it. She says that if Francesca is not around, she might drown in the bathtub. This strikes Francesca very odd, and she feels very weirded out by it. She gets scared a little bit. Another indication that Kate might do something to harm herself. She doesn't really feel safe for this, so she tells her that she needs to ask her supervisor first. Kate begs her not to leave. She says, please don't go. I need to take a bath and you need to stay here or otherwise I will drown. She is so serious that Francesca gets goosebumps all over her body. So Francesca leaves, telling her she needs to ask her supervisor, and her supervisor says, you do not have to help a guest take a bath. They can do it themselves. And Francesca returns to cleaning other rooms, and there is no other call being placed by Kate towards the reception, which is relieving but at the same time worrisome. Francesca once again can't sleep that night. She's thinking of that one guest staying at 3312. She's thinking that she might hurt herself. She decides to go check on her, even though it's literally 2 a.m. in the night. She leaves her room, goes down to reception, and tells her her intentions. She takes the key card that opens every single room in that hotel and goes to the room 3312. Carefully, she opens the door, walks inside, and immediately from her feet, she hears this rustle sound, and she realizes the entire room was buried in paper and parchments of paper. Random words scrabbled together: Coronado, Lillian Russell, and I don't know any such man. These same sentences written together, sideways, mixed, all over the page, sometimes with big words, sometimes with smaller handwriting. As she's moving through the room, she just has to kick this paper to the side. That's how many pages there are on the ground. And she goes to the bedside to see where Kate would be sleeping, only to find that the bed is empty. And the light in the bathroom is turned on, the door half open. So she carefully starts walking towards the bathroom, preparing herself to see what she suspects of seeing. Even though she's closing her eyes and peeling, she pushes the door, walks inside the bathroom, only to see Kate having a bath, but at the same time she's submerged completely in water. Francesca rushes over to help Kate get out of the water. Kate is almost pushed down by an entity underneath the water, and almost as though she's struggling to come up, she's inside that water, almost drowning. Francesca grabs Kate's hands and tries to pull her out, but Kate, her body kind of comes up, but her head stays in the water. She arches her body upwards, but her neck just stays underneath the water. And Francesca feels that Kate is forcing her as well underneath the water. She's almost pulling her. It's clear that Kate is forcing this on herself as well as Francesca, because she's pulling Francesca from underneath the water. Francesca feels this and she wants to get away now. She wants to actually let go of Kate, but she can't. She feels weak. And in that second, or in that instant, Kate succeeds in pulling Francesca underneath the bathtub with her. And for a second there, they're both submerged in water. Kate and Francesca are face to face, and their faces are both under the water, and Francesca fears for her life like she has never felt before. Even though it's been 2 or 3 seconds, she feels as though she can't breathe and immediately tries and struggles to get out of the water. She's drowning in that moment. When she looks at Kate, her face does not seem to have any panic. She doesn't seem disturbed or bothered by this at all. She has a very dull face. She just stares at Francesca, and Francesca, with that strong pull, manages to get out of the water as well as pulling Kate out, and they both gasp for air. Kate, breathing very loudly over and over again until her breath comes back to her, starts talking barely. I told you, she says, I told you that I would drown. Why did you leave me? And she yells at Francesca, blaming her for the incident that almost happened. Francesca can't believe what she had seen. She was confused. She wasn't sure what had just happened, whether or not Kate had forced this on her, or she actually meant it. Was she actually drowning? Was it her own doing? Francesca helps Kate get out of the bath, brings a towel, helps her get dry and even dress up. And for the same night, she actually does not return to her room. She stays there, and Kate and her, they start talking. She suggests Kate go see a doctor, because she thinks she's not okay, she's not well. Kate assumes that Francesca is talking about her stomach cancer and thanks her for her kind words, but she does not need to see a doctor right now, that a doctor soon would be coming to her room. She had a brother and that was a doctor, and he would come and visit her and even find a cure for her. Francesca is not certain of this story. If it's true, if it's not true, she does not know, because Kate had told her so many stories before. It was something that Kate had written down many days before. It was not true. Kate did not have a brother, let alone a doctor brother. She was just making it up in her mind, but she was believing in it from within her heart that a doctor brother would come with a cure. That same morning, Francesca helps clean out the room. She picks up the paper from the ground and just piles it up on the desk, and she leaves for the day. Later, the reception gets another call. Francesca is being asked by Kate. This time though, Francesca, she doesn't want to go back there. She spent the entire night there already, and she told her supervisor what had happened that night. So she sends a bellboy instead. The bellboy helps Kate take her bath, even rubs her head, and during the bath, Kate asks about her doctor brother, whether he had come or whether he had sent a letter of some sort. The bellboy says he doesn't know anything about him, that no one had come for her, or there was no letter. And Kate responds to this in a very sarcastic manner. Oh, no one comes for me anymore. When the bellboy comes back to Francesca, because Francesca had asked him to go there and then come back to her and report on what had happened, whether everything was all right, he tells her about the bath, what Kate had asked of him, and what she had said. Francesca asks, is there anything else odd that happened? And the bellboy says, no, she just wanted me to rub her head and ask about her doctor brother, and that was it. Nothing else was spoken of. She seemed like a normal, warm, and kind lady. On the fourth day of Kate's stay at the Coronado, she leaves her hotel room and even leaves the hotel. And this is the first time the staff sees her leave her room at all. Francesca immediately, upon her leave, decides to go to the room so she can clean it before the guest returns. When she enters the floor, however, she realizes a very distinct smell of flame and smoke in the air. There's some smoke coming from out of Kate's room, 3312. Instantly, she reaches to her card and opens the door, fearing that there might be flames inside the room, that Kate had burned down the hotel room before she had left. But once she enters the room, she is relieved to find that there's only a pile of ash left. Kate had burned down everything that she had written, all of those parchments of papers, and it must have been a big fire. She wasn't sure how she was able to extinguish that fire, but she was just thinking that it must have been very lucky. The room could have easily burned down, everything was very flammable. And then on the desk, she sees this envelope that was not burnt down with the rest of the paper. And on it is an address with the name Mistress Lottie Bernard on it. The name, however, was striking through, and on the side was written Kate. She opened the envelope, only to find nothing. It was empty. Francesca did not know what to make of this. She did not care, frankly. She cleaned the room of the ashes. She went to her supervisor to share the story that had happened, what Kate had done in her room, and the dangers it posed. Because if the fire had started in that room, it could have easily spread around the whole hotel. Now her supervisor was also concerned. She said that she would talk to the guests and they would take all kinds of precautions if they can. Kate returns very late that day. The supervisor had already left off work. He informed Francesca that he would be talking to Kate the next day. Francesca was already done with her shift as well, and she was in her room just relaxing when one of her co-workers just knocks her door and says Kate, the guest in 3312, specifically was asking for Francesca. Francesca, tired and exhausted of this guest, thinks to herself, no, I can't do this. And she says, just send the bellboy. He was able to do it last time. He can take care of her once again. But her co-worker says she specifically asked for Francesca, and there was no way she was gonna accept the bellboy. She needed Francesca. So Francesca, she doesn't even dress up. She just goes in her pajamas and knocks with this frown on her face. Kate opens the door. She's in her bathrobes, ready to take another bath. Francesca fears the thought of what had happened last time, the bath that they took and the almost drowning that was happening. She doesn't want to experience it again. She tells the guest that There's a storm outside. The wind is very ominous and very strongly blowing. The storm would cause the water to be drained and to become muddy. This was a lie, of course, but Francesca thought, if I tell a lie like this, the guests will probably not want to shower. And surely enough, Kate says, well, a muddy water, I can't bath in a muddy water. And she says, just come inside and talk to me for a little bit. I have no one. Francesca, unwilling and very hesitant, enters the room for what would be the last time. Kate asks her about her brother. Was there any message? Any letter? Anything at all from him? And the answer, as she finds out, was nothing. No one had called for her. No one had sent a letter. Kate was utterly and completely alone. Kate's voice starts to shake and she starts crying, but in a very calm and collected way. She doesn't just burst into tears. She's crying very silently while she's sitting on the bed, tears rolling down her face, and Francesca feels bad inside. This troubled woman was clearly sick, and she'd had a very difficult childhood as well as a past full of pain and fear, and she feels guilty now that she had gone to her supervisor and snitched on her or on this event that had happened that day. She was now afraid that the supervisor was going to kick her out on the streets. So she felt guilty and she went towards Kate, kind of rubbed her arms and shoulders and told her that it was going to be fine, that it was going to be all right, that she was certain that her brother would eventually come, that he must have been busy during all those days. Kate then proceeds to thank Francesca for everything she had done, for all the cleaning she'd done, and for saving her during her drowning in the bathtub. Francesca nods her head very calmly, and as she turns to leave, she takes one more deep breath, but then suddenly something grabs her arm. She turns around with a shock and surprise and fear because she didn't hear Kate get up from the bed and walk towards the door. There, Kate stands and looking dead serious into the depths of her soul. She comes closer to Francesca and whispers in her ears, "This place," she says, "it's dangerous. This hotel is no good. Death lurks in the corners. Someone tried to burn me today. Believe me, Francesca, someone came into my room and tried to burn me. If I didn't have that bottle of water, I was gonna be burned alive. And when I came back, all that burn and all those ashes were gone. Believe me, Francesca, death is near." And as Kate is pulling back her head from Francesca's ear, she stares right into her eye holes one more time, into her soul. Francesca can feel those cold and fearful eyes that are not blinking whatsoever stare right into her eyes, and she shivers and she feels cold. In that moment, she's so afraid. And as Kate lets go of her arm, she looks at her arm only to see the handprints that Kate had left after pushing and pulling so hard on her arm. She takes one step backwards, still looking at Kate, afraid to turn her back to her now, opens the door with her hand from her behind. She walks out, and Kate still continues to stare in her eyes. And Francesca, once she's out of the room, she immediately shuts the door, and Kate, from behind, locks it immediately. Both sides having this sort of fear and aggression towards each other that was inexplicable in that moment. When Francesca went to bed that night, that's the night she realized that the previous nights she had gotten some sleep. There was no sleep for her that night. That same sentence constantly just in her brain repeating itself, the words that Kate had whispered, "Death lurks in the corners of this hotel." It was 5 a.m. in the morning. Francesca didn't get 1 minute of shut-eye when she got out of her bed to these sounds coming from the corridor of the housekeepers, people yelling, screaming. As she left her room, she had these cramps in her stomach, almost knowing what had happened or what might have happened. She had a really bad feeling inside of herself. And surely enough, the hotel's young assistant electrician had found Kate's body on the stairs that were opening to the beach and to the ocean. So she had walked outside to those stairs, during that stormy and rainy weather when nobody else would be outside, and she was lying there with a gun wound to her head, and one of her hands, her left hand, was a gun. She had a black dress on when they found her, and some makeup was found on her as well. So it's believed that she was definitely going somewhere, maybe to meet someone, because she had really taken care of herself and prepared for something. The rain and the wind and the cold waves of the ocean that were just getting stronger and stronger with this storm had washed away all of the blood that she would have lost. So there was only her body lying at the end of the stairs that was going to the beach. No blood and no stains whatsoever. Now, Kate was normally right-handed. The bullet in her gun did not match the bullet that was found in her skull. It was a mysterious death. It really didn't make sense, but to Francesca, who was later interrogated by the police, it was clear what had happened. And she would go on saying all those things that Kate had shared with her. She would also tell about the problems she had, the writings she had found on the ground, and how she would call reception to get a room cleaned that was already perfectly clean. The police didn't have to do any other research. They just ruled it out as self-injury and self-gun infliction. And thus, Kate Morgan was believed that she had caused her own death. Was it the madness that she was spiraled into? Was it the writings that made her believe something was happening or something was going on? Nobody really knows, but it is believed that her spirit and her soul is still in that hotel, haunting the people that stay there. She was laid to rest in Mount Hope Cemetery in San Diego, which is not very far from the hotel. Francesca, after that day, was never able to get a sound sleep ever again. She would wake up in the middle of the night to things falling over, objects moving in the room, to whispers. She would freak out when she would wake up to these images of Kate Morgan yelling at her, telling her that she was drowning and it's her fault. She felt guilty that she couldn't have done anything about it. She felt as though the death of Kate Morgan was her fault. Was she really haunted by something, or was it her guilt that was eating at her? No one really knows. But what's weird is, even today, as we speak, Hotel del Coronado is not offering tours of the room that Kate Morgan had stood in, which is 3312. They're offering tours for the room 3502, which is the room of Francesca, the housekeeper that had made a connection with Kate Morgan, that had helped her, that had listened to her, and that was the last person to have seen her alive. It was that room that was being haunted. Many guests have even reported objects moving around, chairs just falling over, and whispers or images of ghostly figures appearing and disappearing. Is it possible that Kate Morgan had resented Francesca and had hated her for not being there when she needed her the most? Is it possible that this was the reason she was later haunting her, or was it all the guilt of Francesca? But then how would you explain other housekeepers that had stayed after Francesca in that room, seeing the same images and hearing the same sounds? Maybe Kate Morgan's spirit had indeed stayed in that room to haunt the people that would have a better life than she had. Maybe she hated everyone that had a better life than her. It was the story of Kate Morgan and Francesca that had later, in 1992, led parapsychologist and anomalist Christopher Chacon come to the hotel and redo his research about these paranormal things that were happening at the hotel. He would then conduct an assessment that would last for 12 months, ranging from literally 24 hours a day, basically a whole year, 24/7. They would do this research in those rooms to see if there were any abnormalities or any anomalies, anything at all. At the end of the assessment, there was 10,000 hours of experimental footage, and within those hours, there were things that could not be scientifically explained. These recurring phenomenons included moving of furniture and objects inside the room, concentration of extremely cold air, disembodied shadows being seen, and disembodied voices being heard, and even footsteps coming when there's nobody walking. Many of these footages were recorded and were proven, but really scientifically could never be explained. And many hotel guests, even after, have reported similar things to these phenomena. This ultimately was the story that inspired Stephen King to write 1408, and then the film as well. You can actually reserve a room tour to 502, which used to be called 3502, the room of Francesca, which is the room that is mostly active in terms of phenomenal things happening, based on the research conducted there and based on the guests that have visited. And you can find out about Kate Morgan's visit, as well as all of the research that was conducted there, and maybe even catch a glimpse at all those disembodied shadows that are appearing or disappearing there, if you dare. Thank you so much for listening. If you did enjoy the story, make sure you leave a like. That would mean a lot to me and it would help us a lot too. Also, maybe you've noticed in the channel banner, there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 white dots. That's basically the light that we're creating together. If you subscribe to this channel, I will literally go there and add another pixel of light. So you will become that white dot. And the more we are, the more light there is, and eventually, hopefully, it will become completely white, and then we will have basically sunshine and light in our lives. I hope this video found you in peace and you feel good. See you next week for our next video. Enjoy the upcoming scary, scary ukulele song. Stay safe and stay eerie.
Tried to walk home last night, really thought I'd be fine, but then a sudden thump behind. Wait, is that an alien? What was that sound I heard? Jane, please stop fooling around. What do you mean wash the dishes? Do you realize what time it is? I'm getting the creeps again. Look at these goosebumps on my skin. If I'm not back by 8, the delivery guy probably did it. Now I must fade in the dark, get away from everyone. Oh Jane, I'm so afraid. I'm begging you to stay. Is someone watching me as I'm wide asleep? Getting those goosebumps again. Wait, am I peeing? I'm so scared that I'm peeing.